Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
Ruka was in her room as well. She had gone from crying her heart out to staying still. All she could think of was the time she spent with Ren. And then, she started crying again. She had never felt so helpless in her life before. She was in a state of distress. She had no idea how happy she would be if she dated him, but losing him would kill her inside. It felt like everything was starting to spin, and the world became silent. She had fainted without anyone knowing. Someone rang the doorbell. Robert had just woken up. He sat up, wondering who it was. The man opened the door and saw Scarlett and Walter outside. Scarlett? Walter? What brings you here? Robert was surprised. He thought they would have dinner at the Husson residence. Okay, it's a bit too quiet here. Scarlett asked, Are Claire and Ruka home? Robert looked at the shoe rack. Yeah. They're in their own rooms. Good. We have something to talk about. Scarlett smiled. She heard sounds of footsteps coming from the bedroom. Claire came down tying her hair. She was surprised that Scarlett and her husband were here. What happened to you, Claire? Scarlett noticed that her friend's eyes were puffy. She looked pale and exhausted. Claire heaved a sigh and took a seat on the couch. Scarlett, there's something I need to tell you, but you might get angry too. What is it? It's about Ruka. She's a bad girl now. The guilt Claire felt crushed her, and she buried her face in her hands and started crying. Robert looked at his wife in shock. Claire, just say what you have to say. Don't cry. What do you mean, she's a bad girl? Scarlett sat down beside her friend and patted her back. Just say whatever is on your mind. Claire. Ruka's a good girl. What do you mean she's turned bad? Claire was too ashamed to look at Scarlett. She hung her head low. Scarlett, Ruka is a good child at birth. I know. I always thought she's a kind, upreggy girl. Just tell us what happened. Don't scare us, she quickly said. Yeah, just tell us what happened. Robert was shocked as well. Claire didn't plan on hiding anything. She sighed. Back at your house today, Elle. I saw Ruka kiss Ren. Robert was petrified. My daughter kissed the VP? Scarlett and Walter exchanged a look. There were smiles in their eyes, but Claire didn't notice it. She quickly said, I'll tell her to stay away from Ren, Scarlett. Don't you worry. Scarlett smiled. This is why we're here, Claire. Have you ever thought that they might actually like each other? Claire gaped at Scarlett in disbelief. What do you mean, Scarlett? Ron told us he likes Ruka back at the hospital. He really likes her. He hopes you'll bless their relationship, Walter said. The cinched couple exchanged a look. The news was a bombshell for them. Ron likes Ruka? They like each other? Is that a joke, Scarlett? I mean, Ren is the VP, and Ruka is just... Ruka. Claire was still in disbelief. Robert quickly asked, when did this happen? Why didn't Ruka tell us? Probably when she was staying with Ren. They fell in love and probably just started dating, Scarlett quickly answered. Claire realized what was going on. She regretted everything she said and did to Ruka. So they love each other. It's not a one-sided love like I thought. Why didn't she say anything? And I actually yelled at her. Wait a minute. I don't hear anything in her room. She should have noticed the conversation and come downstairs by now. Ruka. Claire shot up from the couch and made a dash for Ruka's room. Everyone else followed her. Claire knocked on the door. Ruka? It's me. Open up. The door was locked from the inside. It couldn't be opened, and they had a bad feeling about it. Get the keys. Ruka might be in danger, Scarlett said. Robert went and looked for the keys. Claire was tearing up in panic. Ruka, open the door. I'm sorry. It was a misunderstanding. Please, open up. Ruka? It's me, Scarlett. Let's talk, all right? Don't lock yourself up. Robert came back with the keys. Claire opened the door and went inside. Ruka was lying on the bed. She might be asleep. But Claire thought otherwise. Robert quickly went to the bed and held Ruka. He checked her breathing and told everyone, take her to the hospital. She's passed out. Claire wobbled. The guilt almost made her pass out as well, but Scarlett held her. We gotta take her to the hospital. Claire. Let's go. Robert left the house with Ruka in his arms. Walter got into the car and revved it up. Scarlett took the passenger seat, while Claire got into the back seat. She held Ruka as they made their way to the hospital. This is all my fault. I didn't talk things through with her and went straight to the yelling. I even made her swear she'd stay away from Ren. I should have tried to understand the situation better first. Claire was crying. It's all right, Claire. Don't cry. It's not your fault. Scarlett turned around. They went to a nearby hospital, and Ruka was taken to the emergency room. Scarlett called Ren. Scarlett? What is it? Ron, I need to tell you something, but promise me you'll stay calm. Scarlett was worried he might come to the hospital. He can't run around, not when he's still the VP. Did something happen to Ruka? Ron quickly asked. Well, Claire saw her kiss you back at lunch. She thought Ruka might be trying to date you for money, so she scolded Ruka when they got home. The heartbreak got to Ruka, and she passed out. We're at the hospital. Before she could finish, Ren said, Which hospital, sis? You can't come here, Ren, she stopped him. Just tell me where you are, Scarlett, he said adamantly. Scarlett told him, and he hung up. She sighed. I can't stop him. But she could see that he really loved Ruka. Eventually, Ruka was brought out of the ER and taken to a regular ward. She had an oxygen mask on her face to help her breathe. The doctor said this was a short-term passing out caused by great sadness. It was a matter of time before she woke up. Claire was sitting right in front of the bed, looking at her pale daughter. Ruka must have internalized all the blame. She knew her overreaction shocked Ruka. A motorcade departed from the Hassan residence, and they were heading to a hospital in the town area. Elijah was right beside Ren. He unzipped a bag and unloaded the standard disguise for Ren. There was a mask, a cap, and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. He usually used these on his outings. Why don't you call Mrs. Hassan and have her notify you once Miss Singed wakes up? Elijah wasn't big on the idea of him going to crowded places like hospitals. It's all right. I'll be going in with just you and 2 bodyguards, Ron said. 4 black off-road vehicles stopped by the roadside, and a black car went into the hospital's car park. Elijah opened the door, and out came Ren. He was wearing a long black coat, a black baseball cap, a pair of gold-rimmed glasses, and a large black mask that hid most of his face. However, his tall figure and distinguished air still drew everyone's attention. Elijah followed right beside him, along with several bodyguards in the rear who were on their toes at all times. Walter and Robert were waiting for him in the corridor of the hospital's inpatient ward on the 6th floor. When Robert saw the man that stepped out of the elevator, his heart was moved. He was touched to see Ren coming to the hospital in spite of how dangerous it was for him. Mr. Hassan. Robert stepped forward to greet him. Has Ruka woken up yet? Ron asked gently. No. Claire and Scarlett are both in there with her right now. Robert replied before heading into the room. Mr. Hassan is here. Claire stood up in a tizzy, and Scarlett patted her hand to calm her down. Don't be nervous. Claire was pleased, but she was also feeling a little remorseful. At last, she realized how strong the feelings were between her daughter and Ron. She was also deeply moved by the fact that he came to visit Ruka despite how dangerous it was for him. Rin stepped through the door and his heart dropped when he saw the woman who was lying on the hospital bed hooked up to a ventilator. He turned to Claire and greeted her politely. Mrs. Singed. Mr. Hassan, Claire greeted him back a little nervously. Claire, let's find a place to rest and let Rin sit with Ruka for a while. Scarlett was more than happy to help her brother have some alone time with Ruka. Okay. Claire nodded in agreement. She did not worry about leaving Ruka in Ren's hands. Scarlett turned to her brother and said, Ron, take good care of Ruka. I will. Ren nodded. The two bodyguards continued to keep watch outside the room. Elijah was leaning against the wall and he was on high alert as well. After all, the man sitting in there right now was the nation's vice president, Ron Hassan. Ron sat down by the bed and sighed. He figured out what happened based on what Scarlett told him earlier. So she got a good scolding, huh? Ron blamed himself for it. It was his fault for not informing the Singed about their relationship. His failure to do so led to her family misunderstanding her. I'm sorry. Ruka. It's my fault. Rain took her slightly chilly hand in his and kissed it softly. Ruka was slowly gaining consciousness. She vaguely heard a man's voice that sounded rather like his, but she thought she had to be dreaming. Her eyelids trembled slightly and her eyelashes fluttered as she slowly opened her eyes. The lights along the ceiling blinded her for a moment and she blinked rapidly to get used to the brightness. You're awake. She heard a deep voice calling out to her. Ruka turned her head a little to the side and immediately, she saw Ren's handsome face staring back at her. Startled, she quickly sat up in bed. What are you doing here? Ren stood up from his seat and pulled her into his arms in one fell swoop. He rested his chin on her head as he said, Don't worry. Your parents know all about us now. They won't scold you anymore. Really? They know everything? Ruka's eyes welled up with tears as her despair surged up again. She grabbed his sleeves lightly and leaned against his chest. She was determined to be with him, even if it meant withstanding the brunt of her family's anger. Why am I in the hospital? Ruka looked up at him and asked. Ron ran his fingers through her hair. His heart was aching as he explained, You fainted after being too overwhelmed by your emotions. Scarlett and the others brought you to the hospital. Ruka felt a little mortified and she scampered back into his arms to hide. She had fainted out of grief that she would never be able to be with him anymore. Is it because of me? He asked with a sigh. Ruka did not want to deny it, so she nodded. My mother saw me kissing you back at Hassan residence. She was furious and upset because she thought I was trying to seduce you. Ren sighed once again. He stroked her back to comfort her and kissed her on the forehead. Why didn't you tell her that I'm the one who chased you? Ren chided hoarsely. What makes you think I'd dare to? If I did say that, my mother would have said that I must have gone mad for being so full of myself. Mr. Vice President wouldn't possibly take a liking to me, not even if he were blind. Ruka huffed. He wrapped her head with his chin. Who are you calling blind? Ruka giggled. 2 hours ago, she felt nothing but despair, but now, she was drowning in bliss. Hang on. Does Aunt Scarlett know that you're here to see me? What about your parents? Does everyone know? Ruka clutched his shirt and fired off question after question. Everyone who needs to know does know by now, except for my father. Then, Ron added, relax. My family supports our relationship. Ruka's complexion was a little pale earlier, but now it was bright red. All of them know about it and they're showing us support too? I'm certain your parents will give us their blessing too, or otherwise, it's hard to imagine how sad their daughter would be if she couldn't marry me. Ron commented with a smile. Ruka pouted and punched him in the chest. You're teasing me. She was already embarrassed enough for fainting because she thought she could not be with him. He grabbed her hand and pressed it against his chest. His voice was serious and full of love as he said, I'm not teasing you, Ruka. Words can't express how happy I am that you love me so. Ruka's face turned even redder, but she wrapped her arms around his waist. You better remember that. Ron stroked her hair and said, we will never be apart again, not now, not ever. It's a promise. Okay. We'll never be apart, Ruka agreed with a nod without hesitation. Ruka. She looked up at him. Don't ever faint like that again, okay? You must remember that I'll always be by your side, no matter what happens. Ron was afraid that if another misunderstanding cropped up, she would faint out of sadness or despair once more. It would break his heart if she did. Ruka looked into his deep, brooding eyes and smiled. She feared nothing now since he said he would always be with her. Still, she was vexed at herself for proving her love for him by fainting. What a foolish thing to do. This is the hospital. Why are you here? At last, it dawned on Ruka that a person like him should not be here right now. It's fine. Ron assured her. However, Ruka was not about to be as callous with his safety. She tried to push him away. No, you better leave now. I'm fine. I don't want anything to happen to you. Go now, quickly. Ren grabbed her hand, come with me then. Where to? You can recuperate at my house. No, I can't. Ruka blushed. She felt a little bashful about staying with him. However, Ren was adamant. After all, he was certain that she was the one for him. He wanted to take care of her and he knew that her parents would be fine with it. He would beg them if he had to. Meanwhile, in a waiting room nearby, Claire was both amazed and disbelieving when she heard what Scarlett told her. Why would Ren Hassan, of all people, take a liking to her daughter? It was as if Ruka had won life's lottery. If Ruka did marry Ran, she would have the prestige of being the Hassan's daughter-in-law. Is this true, Scarlett? Is Ren truly in love with Ruka? Why does it feel like I'm dreaming? Claire exclaimed as she clasped her hand around Scarlett's. I couldn't believe my ears when I first heard about it too, but sometimes love happens when you least expect it. Since they're in love, we should just accept it and give them our blessing. My mother is very pleased with Ruka too. She hopes that once Ren's done with the general elections, we can start picking a date for Ren and Ruka's wedding. Will his marriage with Ruka affect him during the general elections? After all, a lot of people know that Ruka grew up with your family. I'm afraid that others might use this information to cause a scandal for Ren. I wouldn't want this to ruin his future. I was concerned about this too, but Ruka is your child. She and Ren are not related in any way. So there's no reason to care about what others might say. Even if someone tries to use this against Ron, I doubt it will amount to anything as long as all of us stand together in their defense. Scarlett assured Claire in her staunch defense of her brother's happiness. Ruka's relationship with the Hassans would change too. You'll be her sister, and she'll be calling Mrs. Hassan Mom. Claire was a little flummoxed by the thought of it. That's nothing to fret over. I'm thrilled to have Ruka as my sister-in-law. Our two families will be joined in marriage now, so we'll be closer than ever. Isn't that a good thing? Scarlett continued to assuage all of Claire's worries without any sign of displeasure. Claire nodded happily. I like the sound of that. I'd love for us to be a family. Claire, you can trust Ron. Ruka's safe in his hands. He loves her very much, Scarlett declared seriously. Claire was still feeling remorseful over the way she admonished Ruka earlier. That combined with the way she felt, as if she had wronged Ruka, made her nod at once. Of course. I have absolute faith in Ron, I'm just worried that he would have his hands full with her since she's still so young. That's not true. Ruka's a thoughtful and mature young lady. Plus, we're glad that he'll have someone by his side now instead of being alone all the time. Scarlett prayed for Ron. He sacrificed a lot for the sake of their family's glory. Just then, Elijah knocked on the door and came in. Mrs. Faulkner, Mrs. Singed. Miss Singed has woken up now and the doctor has cleared her for discharge, so that's being processed right now. Ruka should be fine now. Scarlett stood up and said to Claire, let's go and see her. Claire and Scarlett entered the hospital room and saw Ruka sitting up in bed. Ruka could not look her mother in the eye yet, but Claire came up to her and hugged her. Ruka. I'm sorry for misunderstanding you. Please forgive me. I'm not mad at you, Mom. Ruka returned the hug. She could understand why her mother had been so worried. Mr. and Mrs. Singed, there's something I'd like to ask of you. Ron stood up and said. Ruka's cheeks turned pink. Was he going to say it now? Go ahead, Rin. Robert looked at him. I wish to take Ruka home with me and let her recuperate there until the end of the year. I hope you will give your permission. Ron gave them a pleading look. Scarlett was amused at how impatient he was in his eagerness to keep Ruka by his side. Claire and Robert exchanged glances and nodded without protest. Will it be too much trouble for you, though? Claire asked in concern. Of course not, Rin responded with a smile. Ruka was certain that she looked like a boiled lobster right now, but she could not hide her joy. Does this mean I can stay with him for a few days? I'll head home to pack some things for Ruka and have someone bring it over right away, Claire said. That won't be necessary, Mrs. Singed. I'll prepare the clothes, daily necessities, and whatever Ruka needs. Ren replied lightly. Ruka's face was burning up. She felt incredibly shy that he was doting on her so much in front of her parents. It occurred to Claire as well that Ren had the finest things in life available to him. Ruka would be well taken care of when she was with him. That's settled then. Ren, you should take Ruka home with you now. It won't be good for you to stay here much longer. Scarlett was worried about Ren's safety. Ruka had already pulled her shoes on a long time ago. Ron glanced at her and she said to her parents, Dad, I'll be going now. Claire reached out for Ruka's hand and instructed her, Ruka, remember not to cause trouble for Ron, okay? Ruka nodded. Yes, I know. By the time they came out of the room, Ren had put his mask back on. The gold-rimmed glasses on his nose gave him an air of sophistication. Ruka had only taken 2 steps when she felt his hand close around hers.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.